Hey everyone, so welcome back to the Essentials channel where we talk about the market updates, project reviews and various analysis. So I think by now, as the dust settles for the Trump administration as well as the general elections, the key question to be asking in today's market is, will it be a terrific outcome or will it be a terrible outcome? Haha, pun intended. Alright, so anyway, here are the top 5 main concerns of the market where we will actually deep dive into various pointers and the main concerns that I feel consumers will be having on the ground today. So number 1, with the Trump's administration and the tariffs imposed, will it be a terrific outcome or will it be a terrible outcome? Will the cooling measures be able to save us once again? Number 2, it will be the general elections. With the dust settling right now, will it be actually a more positive outcome with the political stability, or how would it be affecting future Singapore property market prices? The third pointer will be resale and new launches are also high. You go on to Property Guru and you check, you will be just as confused as I am. So what are your next steps and what will your direction be? Number 4, right, with the recent launches, it seems like the market is experiencing buyer's fatigue with the launches of Bloomsbury and One Marina Gardens at 25% and approximately 40% respectively. So is the market slowing down, or is this just about timing issues where the global market is affecting Singapore's market buyer sentiments a little bit? And of course, last but not least, I think by now you are hearing news about cooling measures, especially with the new government coming in. Right, will there actually be an opportunity where they will actually introduce cooling measures? What are the 2 patterns to take note of? And how do we debunk the misconception that cooling measures actually brings prices down? Or does it? So everyone, if you like what you have been seeing so far from all my project analysis, and I've received so many wonderful comments based on the video analysis. Oh, I see your little comments down there. You never go unnoticed. I do my best to reply them. Remember to like, share and subscribe. Click on the button below so that I will continue feeling motivated to create more content for you. So to start off, the first main concern will be of course the Trump's tariffs. Will it be a terrific outcome for the year or a terrible outcome for the year? Actually, I think we need to align ourselves as consumers with the government's vision in terms of the Singapore property market. So the government's vision in Singapore property is actually a need. So what does a need actually means? A need would actually mean that no matter how expensive it is, people will still buy as long as they can afford. So just like my other videos, and I want to really emphasize on this, why I keep consistently bringing up this graph is because it really tells us a very important story of the Singapore market. So with this need in place, we first have to drill this in our head. You buy property in Singapore is for a need. That's why you see all the government policies, the cooling measures all surround this need. Only first time buyers don't get the additional buyer stamp duty, right? Everybody else gets it because they do not want it to be a speculative environment. So in that sense itself, people should be buying homes for their own personal usage. Alright, and with that in mind, it prevents speculative nature. Alright, so their vision is very clear, and this ensures a stable natural demand which ensures sustainable pricing with little over leveraging and little speculations from foreigners. Alright, so with a lot more certainty and less unpredictability. Alright, so you can see from here, this is the chart that I always like to show people. Right, was there a time where it was actually 300 per square foot? Yes, there was. Alright, the last time around that we saw 300 per square foot was actually in 1976. But why your parents, grandparents never go in and buy 10? Right, the main reason is because number 1, the fear factor is there already. The red line is actually the income representation, and then the blue line is actually the property price. Yes, 300 PSF is cheap, but the key important point to take note is nobody can afford, nobody can exit. Alright, that's the problem. Alright, and that's the thing. The fear factor is there. Your parents may have the money, or your grandparents may have the money to buy a property back then, but it's probably one of the most expensive thing. But yet when they buy, touch wood, in case if anything happens to their lives, they want to sell, nobody can afford and buy from them. Now this is a scenario that persisted all the way until 2006. Now what you see is what? The red line coincide with the blue line, means the income representation has caught up. And with that in mind, that's why in 2006 we experienced a boom. Alright, and because of all the fluctuations in the market, Lehman Brothers and all the financial crisis, so on and so forth, the government introduced 14 rounds of cooling measures. Now we see a different pattern. we see that the blue line and the red line now experience a positive income gap. Remember, the red line is actually the income representation and the blue line is the property price. Alright, so now you see it go from such a narrow gap to such a wide positive gap today. Alright, so what does this represent actually? Right, such a wide positive gap. Alright, so from here we can see one thing. Remember, government vision of property in Singapore is what? A need. Meaning to say, no matter how expensive it is, people will still buy as long as you can afford it. Right? Many people may argue with me that, hey, no, wow, the income is not going up as fast as should be, blah, 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 blah. I understand that. Of course, now we are talking about the private market, all right, and we can see the changes in income, and this is really happening as we speak. We have, of course, the HDB side taking care of the median income and catering additional housing needs to them, and that's what is most important. Definitely, I respect that we need to take care of these people and they definitely need to be able to afford the housing, and that's why you see in Parliament they always mention that the income is always the one that follows the HDB prices, or vice versa, the HDB prices follow the income, and all these detailed calculations have been made by URA and HDB itself. So do your math a little bit and you'll understand what I mean. But now let's go back to the private market and take a look. Right, so we see from here, this is the key thing to take note of. From such a narrow positive gap to such a wide positive gap today. Okay, so Singapore property is a need. Alright, no matter how expensive it is, you will still buy. Alright, so today it can be 2,500 PSF from here, like what I show you here. We can just follow this line and extend it all the way and hit 3,000 PSF. Right, you will always have an exit, because as long as the government keeps up with its income policies and cooling measure policies, and we follow the same gradient, you will always have an exit, because as long as people can afford due to a need. Now, 3 years ago there was supposed to be a crisis, which was what? The COVID, right? And this was it. By right means when there's a crisis means the income and general GDP should drop. And with that in mind, we can see from this graph, it actually dropped by 50% because there is such a wide buffer down here. That's why people can afford, people can still buy. People can afford, it is a need, people can still buy. Now the same thing happened 1 year ago, which is what? Actually there was supposed to be a recession. You know, if you check online, there's actually news that a lot of people will retrench. True enough, at this point here, you will see a drop in income and GDP representation. With that in mind, alright, it actually did happen, but because people can still afford, it is a need, people can still buy. People can still afford, it is a need, people still can buy. So why am I telling you this today, everybody? Because we have already survived 3 crises: the COVID, the high interest rate, the Russian war. Alright, so now the Trump tariffs is gonna be like the same as the rest as well, or similar. Of course, there will be impact to jobs, there will be impact to trades, so on and so forth. But because of the cooling measures already buffering us from various aspects, it is to ensure price sustainability so that we have a wide enough gap down here, just like what I just showed you, so that at difficult times, despite the income representation as well as GDP dropping, people will still be able to buy property because it is a need, as long as they can afford, and this wide buffer ensures that they are able to afford. It's just like education. During a COVID crisis that time, did the education prices drop? It didn't. What? Because it is a need. People still need to go to school, people still need to be educated, and that's why prices never drop, as long as they what? Can afford. Alright, so the same thing goes for, let's say, a commodity, Pampers, diapers. It is a need. People will still buy no matter how expensive it is, as long as they can afford. So the same thing goes for property in terms of the property direction by the government in Singapore. Alright, so going back to, will it be a terrible or a terrific outcome? I think with the cooling measures in place, it will definitely buffer us from all of these external market factors, just like how it was for the last 3 crises. I'm not saying that it will be all roses, but definitely there will be some resilience and support to it. Maybe you'll see a bit of the effects, maybe in the resale market, because the resale market is the one that is always directly hit by market factors. They will be the first ones to be impacted because they are the ones that have the full exposure to all of these market factors. But if we talk about the new launch market, because no crisis is going to last for so long, am I right? There will be a point where countries adapt, markets adapt, so on and so forth. So generally people will buy new launches in a way to tide through any crises because of the progressive payment. Take for example, during the interest rate period where it was high, people still bought into new launches and the prices still kept supported because they know 3 years later the interest rates are likely to come down. And because of progressive payment, their exposure to this risk is much lower. And did these people make the right choice? Yes, they did. 3 years ago they bought, 3 years later today they are reaping rewards. They were rewarded for the risk that they took, but it's a calculated risk because they understand how the Singapore government works. So exactly, can we apply the same lessons to the Trump's tariffs right now? Singapore's government has already buffered us with more than 20 rounds of cooling measures, from over leveraging to the prudence exercise by the government to make sure that your income coincides with the property prices and the amount of income that you can use to take your mortgage, so on and so forth. All this prevents over leveraging and the various ABSDs to prevent speculation and to make sure that our demand is all local demand to ensure price sustainability, so that we will avoid all the knee-jerk effects whenever a crisis has happened. Why do I say this? Is because when you have a crisis and if majority of your demand are foreigners, what would that be? They will have a knee-jerk effect. They will have a panic attack where they will just drop everything and sell whatever they have in Singapore's market. That will cause a knee-jerk effect in terms of prices. Are we seeing that in today's market? Time and time again, the cooling measures has proved its worth. And exactly, we have this article down here. Singapore property may be a good place to hide. Why? Because of government's vision of a need. And with that wide positive income representation gap versus the property price index, it ensures a very good safety net and buffer. So if we just understand a little bit more based on the Trump's tariffs, it is more about goods prices going up, services going up, means it would experience the same kind of effects of what inflation will bring us. Am I right to say that? So with that in mind, of course, I'm not here to be a financial consultant and advise that, but we are just recognizing the attributes and the nature of the problem. With that in mind, it is similar to what we just experienced, which is the high interest rates, but of course, maybe on a much greater scale, because the tariffs are actually more than 10% in certain countries and a base 10% within Singapore. So with that in mind, we may feel certain effects, but if you are buying into a new launch, I think it is safe given the buffer it provides. But if you buy into a resale, maybe you might actually want to hold on a little bit to check out how it's actually like at this current moment. Alright, but in all, we have the cooling measures to actually buffer us from all of these external market factors. Do your calculated risk. I think it is good. So set up a one-to-one consultation with me so that we can actually cater to your scenario and evaluate the risk for you. So here we have two graphs. One is the stock drop from Trump versus the PPI. The first graph we have is the prices versus the STI. You can see from here when the STI is actually dropping, prices actually kept and held its support, and then after it went up. Alright, when the STI has actually dropped since the Trump's tariffs came in, our property prices still went up. Same thing for the S&P. You can see when it was actually coming down that time, right, we were actually shooting up all the way as well. So in a way, because real estate is actually very tangible in that sense, and it hedges against the effects of inflation, so on and so forth. In fact, it is in the same line as inflation because of material contracts, construction contracts. All of these are in line with inflation, as well as Trump tariffs are also causing a similar nature of problem, which is kind of like what inflation would be, because all the supply chain will cause all the supply chain prices to go up. So instead of going against it, why not you buy property to hedge against it and go with the same wave? Because whatever problems that all these Trump tariffs causes is actually going into the property, which will end up raising your property prices in that sense. So work into your advantage by buying property in a way, because you will hedge against all of these issues. Number two, general elections. I think by now, as the dust settles, we can get on with business. I think definitely the Singapore government has a lot to work on in terms of the trade issues as well as the Trump tariffs, but this is the last four patterns that I observe after every general election. So I've actually charted a graph down here. The red dotted line actually shows the general elections in 2001, 2006, 2011, 2015 and 2020. Out of all these four patterns in place, actually all of them has shown positive increment in terms of price trend. Alright, so could it be because of the added political stability? I think it is, because what Singapore is well known for is the political stability. And being very concerned Singaporeans, we are also concerned before the general elections, how would the political stability swing and how would the favour swing to the different parties. And with that in mind, I think there was of course a little bit of slowdown just before the general elections in terms of the property market. But isn't that something that you can actually capitalize on? And especially with the results actually coming out right now, I think the political stability is sustained and remained. In that sense, can we actually use this chance to capitalize and buy in now so that we can continue to ride on the wave? But the next key important thing to take note, do our cooling measures actually buffer us from our own local market factors as well? I think the government has done a very awesome job in terms of buffering us from our own local market factors also. Last time, if you have such a news in the local market, definitely everybody will come to a standstill, not even buy anything until finally the general elections are over. But because of the prudence exercised by the government itself in terms of all our cooling measures, it actually buffers us from our own local market sentiments, making sure that property in Singapore is a need, and most importantly, because of the natural demand, the affordability, it ensures price sustainability, and that is the key thing to take note. And that's why it's very safe to come into Singapore. And based on the last 4 trends of the property price index versus the general elections, we see a positive uptrend. Can we capitalize on this for you? But most importantly, how are you going to choose your unit? Set up the one-to-one consultation with me again and we'll find out. So now we head on to point number 3. New launch prices are high, so should I head on to the resale side? But when we look at resale is also high. I'm not sure if any one of you down there observed this observation as well. For me, when I head into Property Guru and search for my clients that time, or even go in to see as a consumer, I realized that, wow, actually, new launch high, resale also just as high. Alright, there's a few reasons behind that, but pick any new launch cluster like the Lentor cluster or the Hillview cluster, or even the Upper Bukit Timah cluster, you will realize that the resale prices have caught up so much that sometimes it is even more expensive than the new launch prices itself. So why do we see this and why are we experiencing this confusion? Well, what we always see in terms of the newspaper will always news and hype about the new launches. Wow, this one moves so fast. Wow, that moves so fast. But in the end, what they didn't show you is also resale also moving quite fast. And the most important part is this: because of the hype and the sensationalization, it took your attention away, alright, to the new launch side, thinking that new launch is actually very high. But are we able to identify the opportunities down there or not? Because if we go and look at resale and we search, based on the age of the resale itself, right, sometimes it may seem like it's a lower PSF or lower pricing, but in actual fact, if you prorate it accordingly and bring it back to its current age, right, actually it costs almost the same PSF as what we are seeing in the new launches. So here I have one example which is in the Lentor area. Back then, Lentor actually had an average PSF of 2081 PSF starting from 2062 PSF versus Panorama with its recent transaction being about 2046 PSF with a 1012 square feet at 2.07 mil. Alright, so you can see the quantum as well as the PSF, they are pretty similar with a less than 2% gap, you know. And from there, the prorated, if we prorate this resale as though it is sold as a brand new property today based on its age. So we have Panorama, 2046 PSF divided by 88 times back to 99. We actually get 2301 PSF, which is actually higher than the current PSF asking price of a new launch. So can we identify this as a crucial point that we can actually consider the new launches? Because I'm also just as confused as you sometimes. And don't forget, when we buy a resale that time, we also need to do our renovations. So it really depends on your objective today. If your objective is to buy somewhere for your own stay, then maybe going for the resale can meet your instant gratification, your instant needs. But if you are saying that, hey, I want some options in life and I want actually to have more appreciation and more certainty in doing so, then maybe new launch might actually be a better alternative for you, since their entry price, the gap is no longer as wide as it used to be. Alright, so of course we have the Hillview area as well. On average, they are doing about 2000-ish PSF. We actually get Midwood transacting at about 1929 PSF. If we do the same prorated is actually in the same range of 2053 PSF. Actually, the resale and the new launch are selling at the same price. And don't forget, because the resale is about 5 to 6 years old already, you may actually need to spend more to do some renovation. So here I have actually a calculator created by Propnex itself to clearly see the numbers. I used to do this in Excel, but right now I have this calculator and make my life so much easier. So we have this BUC versus resale own stay analysis. Let's say we decide to do a 2.5 million property new launch versus a 2.4 mil resale. I give you a benefit of doubt, get you 100k cheaper in terms of resale prices. Alright, of course we see an annual growth of 7% versus the resale inflation of 3% per annum. How do I get 7%? Actually, we have an investment suite. Right, what I always like to do is to show my clients, let's say we use riverfront residences, and then we check out the profitability. Alright, profitability, we view all, and then we search the amount. So if you see based on this chart itself, you can see all the profitability from 966k all the way down to 550k. Do you realize actually who are the ones making the bigger profits? The 3 and the 4 bedrooms. Because why? Singapore real estate is a need. So you go to a place cheapest, largest in the entire Singapore, alright, catering to high homestay demand, right? And that's where you get low supply, high demand environment. That's where you will maximize your profit. So you can see that annualized is all about 6 to 8%, and that's why I found the middle ground and put it at 7%. So from here, we continue renting. If we buy a new development, let's say you are currently staying in the 3 bedrooms, you want to go and rent another 3 bedrooms within the same compound. On average, it will be about 5,000. So instantly we compile the cost needed. Now, maintenance fee is what you will be paying in terms of your resale. So let's put a $600 per month maintenance fee, including sinking funds for an average 3 bedroom resale. Alright, and then of course you have your estimated property tax at 12,582. Some minor renovations, maybe for 3 bedrooms on average. I asked all my consumer friends already. They always tell me on average for a 3 bedroom is 100k. So we're going to put 100k there. And let's say we do 10k for furniture. Depending on your appetite and your taste for furniture, we can see how much you want to put there. So, but let's put an average of $10,000. So with that in mind, these are all your numbers. You will see that despite all the expenses incurred by renting and so on and so forth, you have the new launch having a net profit of 321k, as well as the resale making a loss of 45,000. Alright, the return of equity for a new launch is about 47.3%, while the return of equity for a resale is negative 6.3%. Total cash after you do sell both will be 1,682,000 respectively. Now everybody, I'm not saying that resale cannot buy. Resale will still grow, right? But what is the difference is actually depending which one actually feels better. One, you pay your down payment and that's it. You let time transpire and manifest itself. By the time you reach your selling time, the selling period, you sell, straight away you get that 321k on top of your down payment that you put in. Which one actually feels better? The flow of cash. The second one, you buy the resale. After you buy the resale, you're still paying your installments, your property tax, your maintenance fee. Every day you're paying something. And then just to sell and get all of this money back at the end. Right? In a way, you are just selling to get back whatever that you paid in advance. As compared to, you put in this amount and then straight away when you sell, you get back this amount on top of that, this extra 300k. Which one actually feels better? Alright, so it's the flow of cash that actually helps you elevate your assets in a way also. Number 4, with the recent new launches like Bloomsbury and One Marina Gardens, they are only sold 25% as well as 40% respectively. Are people finally experiencing buyer fatigue, or is this just temporary? So we deep dive into the numbers a little bit. Here I have screenshot for you the app already. Alright, from the app, the total number of new launches that Propnex is currently selling. So Propnex has all the new launches in the entire Singapore. We are only left with 4,800 units approximately in terms of the new launch supply. Alright, so what is the difference? The URA supply pipeline that you see, the unsold inventory, includes lands that have been sold but hasn't been launched yet. And that's why it may give you an impression that there's many things to choose from. If you go on to URA numbers, it's actually about 18,000 to 19,000. But does it really feel that much or not? 18,000 to 19,000 units. When actually we go onto the market and experience it ourselves, it doesn't feel so much. And in fact, it is quite limited choices. So here I am bringing to you the actual numbers of the new launches in the market right now, which is only 4,800 units left in the market, which are mainly 3, 4 and 5 bedrooms. Alright, so these are the ones that still have supply to choose from. Some have increased price, some haven't, and that's why I'll be here, of course, to help you identify which ones are the ones that have increased or not. But the key thing to take note is this. Probably for Bloomsbury and One Marina Gardens, it may be a timing issue due to the Trump tariffs as well as the general elections. This double whammy, and just nice the developers sway go and choose this date to launch. It may have affected a bit of the buyer sentiments. But if you are the developer today of the remaining units in the whole market, as well as Bloomsbury and OMG itself, how confident will you be as a developer with only 4,800 units left in the market? I think you'll be quite confident, and that's why they press on to launch the projects. And true enough, right, within the first 2 weeks of the launch, after the launch, more than 30 to 50 units have been sold for the respective projects after the launch. I take note. So meaning to say, yes, Singaporeans were a bit affected by the Trump and GE sentiments, but the minute they realized that the Trump took a U-turn, and of course our Singapore cooling measures playing its crucial role again, they have confidence in Singapore's market. They are going in to buy again because they recognize that there is very limited supply as well as choices in the market. So with that in mind, limited choice plus the 4 push factors that I showed you before, it brings a call to action to the buyers, especially with our cooling measure in place to ensure price alignment and URA policies to ensure good products that ensure livability, which in turn ensures exit. So anyway, the key question to ask is this: with so limited number of new launch units left in the market, if you are the developer, what will your next step actually be? I think we all know the answer already, right? Which is what? To drive up the prices. So why not, and how do we capitalize on this current market transition? So do not be fooled by all this movement of the market in terms of the initial launch of Bloomsbury and OMG. Probably they were just a bit sway and bump into the Trump tariff, but we must deep dive into the supply numbers and learn how to draw out a call to action for ourselves as consumers today. We can blame it on market sentiment, but don't forget, a lot of the cooling measures have already buffered us from our external market factors like Trump, so on and so forth. Once people see that price is sustainable in Singapore with no fire sale and people are able to afford this need, then I think we better be mindful of the numbers, because with such a limited supply and high demand with high affordability like what I showed you just now, the market may just well move in an upward direction. So can we capitalize this market transition for you? Last but not least, I think by now you all are hearing there may be new cooling measures. In fact, some of you have speculated that after the general elections, the government will take this chance to implement cooling measure. Before don't do, after that then do. Am I right or not? But actually, I don't think the government is that reckless or that opportunistic. Alright, I don't think so lah. I think it's also due to the dynamics and the numbers happening in the market. Alright, I think they all operate in individual modules. Right, real estate is real estate, URA is URA, so on and so forth. So different people are monitoring different numbers. So I personally, as a consumer and a real estate agent, I observe 2 patterns. What are the 2 patterns to identify before a new cooling measure happens? Alright, I think the first pattern, just like my previous video got mentioned before, the first pattern is this: there must be an oversupply for effective price control using cooling measures. So you can see from this graph down here, you will realize just before the 2013 cooling measures, there is 100k units, and that is the first time where we actually see so many cooling measures being implemented by the Singapore government. It did cause prices to adjust itself, but the most important part is this: when the 100k clears off at this point here, no matter what cooling measures you have, prices shoot back up. The next similar pattern in 2018 happened as well. In 2018, there were 70 en blocs, which equates to approximately 70,000 units coming into the market. And with that in mind, could you see the flattening out of prices? But the minute the 70,000 units clears off at this point, prices shoot back up, needing a new set of cooling measures. So can you recognize this important pattern down here? Is the oversupply is actually the main cooling measure or the most effective cooling measure. The key question to ask is this: where is our oversupply in the recent years? Ever since COVID happened, due to manpower issue, we are still catching up with the number of units as compared to the demand. Right, why I say that? Because in December 2021, we only had 5,000 additional units there. What happened to the 70,000 or the 100k units that we once saw? Moving forward in 2023, there was only an introduction of 11,000 plus units. 2024, also 11,000 plus units. And finally in 2025, 13,000 units approximately. So with that in mind, we are just keeping it in equilibrium, and anytime the demand goes up a little bit more, we are back in an undersupply situation. So with that in mind, can we say that oversupply is actually the most effective cooling measure? But where is our oversupply now? So this is the first pattern, and that's why we can observe with the recent land sales, I think the government is ramping up is to try to create this scenario in a way so that we can actually achieve a bit of price cooling off period. But when I say cooling, it just means flattening out the rate of growth rather than dropping prices. So that's the first pattern we all must take note. Now the second pattern is this: you will observe one thing, there will always be a low point after every cooling measure. When I mean low point, it doesn't mean that the prices drop drastically. It just means it adjusts by a 0.1, 0.2% most of the time because of the resales being affected. But other than that, it sustains, and then from there it bounces back up. So we can see from here, after the 2013 cooling measure, a low point is formed, and then it bounced back up, hitting a new high. Same thing after the 2019 or 2018 cooling measures, a new low point is formed, and then a new high is achieved. Same thing, December 2021 measures, a low point is formed, dropping by a 0.1 to 0.2%. From there, it bounced back up to hit a new high. Same, February 2023 cooling measures, after the high, it dropped by 0.2%. The low point of the next cycle bounced back up. Alright, so you will realize that after cooling measures, after all, it's still a little bit of negative news. It takes time for buyers to accept this psychologically. With that, it drops by a 0.1, 0.2%, but it will form the low point of the next cycle. So from there, can we catch this low point to enter so that we can catch the uprise as well? So that's the two patterns of every cooling measure. So the thing is this: will there be a cooling measure coming soon? If we take a look at this, I have the price chart here. Right, for 2021 Q1 to 2021 Q4 year on year, it increased by 10.6%, and that's why there was a December 2021 cooling measure aimed at private property market. For the year 2022, there was a 8.6% growth. That's why the September 2022 cooling measure was aimed at private as well. So that anything that is close to double-digit growth, that is probably where you need to take note of. Alright, the next thing will be 2023. April 23 cooling measure. Actually, if you look back, all these are mostly HDB cooling measures because it only grew by 6.8%. Now, how about 2024? Actually, while all consumers may think that, hey, the prices must have gone down, so on and so on, it's because you were looking at the PSF due to the GFA harmonization. But if we look at the price quantum itself, actually it remained quite the same. Alright, because of GFA harmonization, it dropped the size, it dropped the quantum while maintaining layout efficiency. Alright, but with that in mind, actually the prices only went up by 3.9% for the 2024 year on year. So with that in mind, it is far from our double-digit growth. But everybody, let's remember this number, 3.9%. Right, so, and I'm going to simulate this number here. So if we look at 2018 cooling measures, the prices actually went up by 9.6%. We are at this juncture of 3.9% at this point. Should we wait, or should we go in now? Many people will say because they feel that there is a cooling measure coming in, they will decide to wait. And if they wait, what happens? Did they end up paying higher than what they were supposed to pay before that? In case you think I cherry pick, let's go for December 2021. Alright, we are at the same juncture here at 3.9%. Alright, making this decision process again. Let's say if we decide to wait and we wait until the cooling measures come in at this point, did you end up paying higher than what you were supposed to pay here? Alright, so the key thing is this. I always tell people, buy, enter now to wait for the next cooling measure. Because what? Only because the price go up too much. That's why the government will introduce cooling measure ma. Can I catch this go up too much for you or not? Alright, many people have the misconception that cooling measures actually drop prices. In fact, it actually drops the rate of growth. From such a steep gradient, becomes such a not so steep gradient in that sense. So more often than not, they end up paying higher than what they were supposed to before. So in a way, here are my 2 patterns how to identify cooling measures. But most importantly, if you are already starting to hear this, faster enter now to capitalize on the growth of the market, so that when they introduce cooling measures, you will already be sitting on a margin, so that it gives you options in life. So with the margin that you have in place, can we evaluate from there, sell, and catch the next cycle's low point once again? So now that you know the main concerns of how to be a buyer in today's market and eliminate all these objections already, the key thing to take note is this: what are you going to choose? So I have this 3-phase transformation framework that will guide you which are the areas to look out for, especially in the infrastructure phase where you can experience 120% ROE. That's right, you heard it. Alright, but the most important part is, why are we even buying property today? Given the high PSF, given the high prices, so on and so forth, what is your purpose of buying property? I always talk to my friends, my clients, and my consumers, all those people who contact me from YouTube. Why are they even doing this today? If we are not even clear about the bigger picture, then I think it is very dangerous. We buy real estate for a very, very clear reason, which is what? Building capital. Of course, sit down with me, engage me for your one-to-one consultation, so that we can actually give you solutions to your scenario. We want to teach you how to be a buyer in today's market, so that you can navigate all of the market obstacles today. But the key important part is this: why are we doing this? What is our clear purpose? So if you like my content so far, continue to like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to set up a one-to-one consultation with me, where I'll cater to your scenario, and I have the answer to every scenario that you have, as long as you have the resources and the financial capabilities to be able to do so. So remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.